The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. What a game. It's been 3 years since its release now, and I still believe it to be one of the highlights of the ARPG genre. I'll be honest, I don't have much of a history with this franchise. In fact, this is the first game in the series that I even wanted to play, mostly as a result of the hyped E3 trailers and the still gorgeous visuals. But I also saw something else in those trailers, a rich, realistically depicted universe with enormous amounts of world building behind it, a story that had the potential to have everything high fantasy fans like myself could ask for, and an open world full to the brim with adventure and secrets. I was fucking hyped for this game back in the ye old days of 21.5. I was ready from day one to sacrifice all the hours it would take to beat this game and all its side content. I wanted to delve deep into understanding the characters, the politics of the world, the magic, the monsters. And so I did. Multiple times. I adore The Witcher 3. It's one of my all-time favorites. Hell, it probably is my favorite. It got me to read books again, for fuck's sake. All because it presented a universe and characters that just clicked with me. And yet, to this day, I can't pinpoint the exact reason why they did click. However, there's one thing I am certain of. The Witcher 3 delivered on each and every one of my expectations. There are many reasons I love this game, but one big one is the world of The Witcher 3. I just have to commend the creative directors, artists, composers, sound designers, and anyone else at CD Projekt Red that worked hard at achieving a masterful adaptation of an existing universe, and doing everything in their power to make it look and sound the way it does today. The world of The Witcher is a character in and of itself. It's complex, broken, terrifying, yet oh so wondrous. The way it infuses political themes into adventure storytelling and plays on old fairy tales with sadistic renditions. It is sheer imagination condensed into grounded fantasy fiction. And a lot of that is thanks to a man named Andrzej Sapkowski, the writer of the novels which these games are based on. The Witcher 3 made me read these books. It made me want to go back to immerse myself in the world it's adapting. And the books are pretty awesome too. So I think it's fair to say that what CD Projekt Red has done here is pretty special. This world is packed with detail. It feels grounded and lived in. And that's what I love most about it. It is cohesive and immersive. You ride through rural swamplands, find rundown villages with struggling people in them, because of course it's wartime. You stroll through the streets of Novigrad, past crooked houses and even more crooked people. The sounds of the market square permeate the atmosphere while everyone goes about their daily lives. And within this city, prosecution and execution. Scapegoats become apparent, and people are killed because they're just a little bit different from everybody else. This world can be dark, but a lot of the time, it isn't. Because people in this world still know how to live. They still get by. They still attend plays and performances. They still throw feasts. They still honor the dead, and they still appreciate the living. Mostly. And when you mix this human drama with a world where monsters, elves, dwarves, halflings, werewolves, vampires, witches, and sorceresses all coexist, something truly magical happens. You end up with a diverse variety of themes to explore and present to someone who's never given a thought in the world to how captivating they all could be when working seamlessly together. Slap some real fucking good character writing on top of that, and then you have something that I would call a masterpiece. Find just about any review of The Witcher 3 out there, and you're probably bound to come across something mentioning the great amount of depth in character writing and development within it. There's good reason for this, because in my opinion, this is one of The Witcher 3's aspects that truly elevate it to excellence, especially above most other action RPGs available at the time of writing. I believe that while most baseline character work was done for them in the books, CD Projekt Red has fine writers on their team who are especially good at writing meaningful dialogue. The dialogue in this game plays a role in making these characters who they are. It distinguishes one character from the rest of the cast and makes them feel like a real person. Characters are sometimes really funny in this game, sometimes they're very emotive, other times they're bitter, and sometimes they're total smartasses. This great dialogue has a lot to owe to the excellent voice acting too, because with both these elements combined, each character literally and figuratively has their own unique voice and input on the world and situations they're in. Having realistic characters that effectively and contextually fit into the world they're in has as much to do with player engagement as good environmental world building and atmosphere. And thankfully, The Witcher 3 takes enormous strides to assure that these aspects are the best they can be. So let's start with our protagonist, Geralt of Rivia, a monster slayer for hire. Taken away from his former life at a young age, Geralt was to train as a witcher at the School of the Wolf. Geralt showed more promise in the trials than other candidates, which resulted in him undergoing further mutations, leaving him with pale skin and white hair, while also enhancing his abilities beyond most other witches. Because of these extra mutations, Geralt was pulled further from his former humanity and emotive cognition. This means that Geralt can have a more morally grey judgment that's sometimes needed within the world he inhabits. But it still doesn't stop him from attempting to build meaningful friendships either, and it sure as hell doesn't stop him from having romantic interests. The nuance in Geralt's character is in this disparity between how he feels about the world and society and how he feels about the people he holds dear. And there's one relationship attached to Geralt in The Witcher 3 that gets a distinct amount of attention on this front. One that isn't bound by blood or even necessarily by emotion, but by destiny. Ciri is Geralt's child of destiny, his adoptive daughter, and who I like to call The Witcher 3's other protagonist. Now if you've ever read the books, then you'll know the sort of shit Ciri has gone through. Her whole life has been somewhat of an ordeal relating to something she can't even control. Elder blood runs through her veins, granting her extraordinary abilities and the title of the Lady of Time and Space, etc, etc. What makes her really interesting though, is her jaded attitude towards the people that have sought control over her abilities for their own personal gain. Appropriately, the only solace she finds in a world where these very people are pursuing her is with other people whose intentions aren't to use her for political or world domination purposes. I think it's needless to say that CD Projekt could have taken Ciri's character in many different directions in The Witcher 3, and depending on which ending of the game you get, they do. But mostly they decided to focus on grounding her relationships to the people she's closest with, and giving her an empathetic and surprisingly relatable outlook on the duty she's been given as someone who pretty much has to save the world. This is good writing. The fact that Ciri is the hero of the story in her own melancholic way, a way that makes us think about her perspective of everything going on around her, which in turn is crucial to dictating the fate of herself and the other characters in the story. Alright, so there's our protagonists. But what about the supporting cast? Another thing I love about The Witcher 3 is how it treats its supporting characters with an almost equal, if not equal, amount of attention as the main ones. There's the obvious ones like Yennefer, who first appears in the games here, and adds an extra dynamic to player choice when it comes to Geralt's famed romantic interest in sorceresses. She's a really important character too. It's only because of Yennefer that the main quest is even kicked off. She's also one side of the Team Yen and Team Triss love triangle argument, and is ultimately one of the most prominent characters in relation to our protagonists. Yennefer is probably the most strong-willed person involved in this story, which I think makes her a respectable character. She only ever has one goal in mind, unless you choose to do a character side quest, which is excellent by the way, and she does anything she can to achieve this goal, to find Ciri. I also feel that Yennefer was given a bulk of great dialogue to reinforce her chemistry with Geralt in this game, and hopefully bring a player who hasn't read the books up to speed, probably because she hasn't spent the entire past 2 games with the player, unlike Triss Merigold, who is a very well laid character by this point, hiding behind a facade of innocence and heroism to wash away her past of reluctant and manipulative behaviour towards Geralt. But even that facade is very grey, which makes Triss even more interesting. She means the best for people. It's just that she's also got a flawed past that I think kind of haunts her a bit. Thankfully, she's also got some important shit to do in this game, which builds a positive argument for her, despite the more questionable side to her character. I could go on and on about Dandelion, Vesemir, Avalark, Zoltan, Dijkstra, Emperor Emir, Radovid, the Bloody Baron, and it also appears I could go on and on listing the amount of characters in this game that I believe have really compelling narrative arcs. But anyway, the amount of detail cast into almost every character in this game is nothing short of spectacular. And as cheesy as it sounds, these characters have become so familiar to me over the past few years, encouraging me to think about what makes a fictional person worthy of investing someone's time and emotion in them in the first place. And if that's how The Witcher 3 influences me, then how can I not speak volumes of praise for it? Speaking of narrative arcs, The Witcher 3's story is somewhat of an anomaly for me. When I revisit a game, time and time again, it's usually because the gameplay has a hook to it rather than a narrative that pulls me back in. For The Witcher 3, it's both. It has a narrative structure that definitely owes a lot to its world building and successes in character building, but I think that's okay because it still fits together nicely to deliver a memorable experience. The overarching plot is a personal one for our characters, and while it's admittedly simple, it does its job incredibly well, because while it is imperative to the plot and characters that you find Ciri, which is only 2/3 of the game anyway, it's the stuff that happens along the way that makes The Witcher 3 stand out. Every time I play this main quest, I'm always looking forward to my favourite bits, their narrative and emotional beats that I find iconic to this game. Quests like Family Matters, where you're tasked with finding an abusive lord of a husband and father, his family, watching him grieve with regret, knowing he drove all that mattered to him away with his despicable actions, also that Geralt can get the smallest scrap of information as to where Ciri's been and where she might have gone. This quest was such a beautiful introduction to the nuance of The Witcher 3's characters, and really highlights a theme of desperation thriving throughout the game's world. Then there's more two-dimensional quests, like Wandering in the Dark, which quite literally involves its namesake, just to find out that your princess is in another castle. But that quest sets up Ladies of the Wood, an intriguing and dark delve into Velen's underlying evil past and ancient customs. You discover a situation that isn't at all as it seems, and both the player and Geralt are left scratching their heads wondering, what the fuck even are the Crones? It also seamlessly interconnects itself with Family Matters, which is a running theme of The Witcher 3's early quests. It's just too bad that this quest suffers from pacing issues due to unnecessarily drawn out dialogue sections, but despite that, it still delivers on an atmosphere that could only be presented in a Sapkowski novel. Then, even further, you have quests like Count Riven's Treasure and Get Junior, which gives the player insight into the seedy criminal underworld and the equally seedy authoritative witch hunters of Novigrad. And those quests both lead into A Play's the Thing, one of my favourites of the bunch. This quest almost acts as a narrative intermission of sorts, as you spend a fair amount of time preparing and performing Novigrad's hot new stage play. Not only is it smartly tied into the plot by putting on the play to lure someone out of hiding who has information about Geralt's friend Dandelion, but it's also a clever reflection of the political climate within Novigrad, presented in a laid-back and humorous way to the player. When what I would dictate the second act of The Witcher 3's main quest hits, you're introduced to the game's third new open world zone, Skellige. This location change refreshes a lot of things, the tone, the pacing, and the themes of the story. Upon arriving in Skellige, you're presented with the Isles' own political predicament. The king has just died, and their new heir is soon to be decided upon. This whole switch up from a Western European medieval tone to something more akin to Vikings makes this part of the game my favourite, and by far the most memorable. You also get to spend more well-deserved time developing an understanding of Yennefer's character. In fact, you spend pretty much all of this part of the game's main quest engaging in really entertaining dialogue sequences that establish the state of her relationship with Geralt at this point in the mythos' timeline, all while servicing the main plot by investigating Ciri's tracks at a much improved pace over the first act. But it mostly is the nuances showcased through both Geralt and Yennefer's ups and downs that makes me look forward to arriving in Skellige every time I play. Kaer Morhen services the plot in a similar way. The location change refreshes it and reintroduces us to old friends. No Place Like Home is a seriously hilarious quest that gives us another break from the drama, and more importantly, humanizes people who are often dehumanized by the world they live in. I still find this quest a joy to play, not only because it is funny, but because it reinforces a bond shared by these characters who've practically grown together in a situation that's probably far from their ideal. After a long suspenseful trial of the grasses, we're introduced to Avallac'h, who knows Ciri's location, the Isle of Mists. This is a pivotal moment in Act 2 for obvious reasons. After all, the entire game has been dedicated to finding Ciri up until this point. But I can't say I enjoy all of this quest. Every time I replay it, I grow impatient with running around finding the stupid dwarves that don't even really need to be there in the first place, only so I can finally see one of the game's greatest moments.
Got a boat. You can leave with me, but I need to find someone first.
An ashen-haired lass?
Yes.
Oh, dreadful sorry.
Step aside.
She's cold. Spirits left her. Nothing we could do.
Let's wait by the boat.
This moment hits especially hard if you're a book reader, so much to say that this is now one of my favourite cutscenes in any game. After plays one of my favourite battles in any game, the Battle of Kaer Morhen. This is the pinnacle of The Witcher 3's achievements regarding action gameplay with high narrative stakes attached to it. This battle is a spectacle, as a fairly large portion of the main and supporting cast is present, all to protect Ciri from the game's major looming threat. Fortunately, all but one makes it through to the other side. Unfortunately, that one is Vesemir.
I forbid you! You always were an unruly child. I adored that about you. Now fly!
This narrative sequence is heavily complemented by the amazing musical score of this game, and the ever-consistent and emotive dialogue which sells the sentiment of the writer's choice to kill someone off that not only is very close to both fans of the games and books alike, but also the characters within the story. This choice also serves an important purpose: to make revenge all the more sweeter.
Who told you to fight like this?
The Witcher you slew.
It's now that we're entering the third act of the main quest, and while it still has a lot of cool gameplay sequences and character moments, the narrative seems rather underwritten in comparison with the other parts of the story, as it feels as though a giant bow is looming overhead, waiting to finally wrap up a great adventure. Most of the third act consists of preparing for the very final battle, while also preparing Ciri's confidence leading into this event and what's to come later. And it pays off. It just seems that we could have got there a little faster in retrospect. However, the strongest writing of the third act comes with the main story's final moments before the epilogue.
Only I can stop the destruction. I've given it much thought and made my decision.
There's gotta be another way.
What can you know about saving the world, silly? You're but a witcher. This is my story, not yours. You must let me finish telling it.
Good luck, Ciri.
Perhaps I should have told you. I see now you might have understood.
Know you better than you think. Don't keep me waiting.
Aha! It's revealed that you should have been taking Ciri's perspective on events into account the entire time to dictate the final ending of the game. Some people found this unfair, as their adventure didn't end happily because they couldn't accurately identify the decisions that mattered. I can't exactly argue against them, but I can't really say it's the game's fault either. It was foreshadowed without a doubt, and I think it's refreshing to see writing in a game that doesn't so blatantly outline the consequences of your decisions. But most importantly, it caused me to perceive Ciri as the game's second protagonist, and make choices that befitted both Geralt and Ciri, as well as the profoundly strong relationship they share. I can't say that I'll ever forget The Witcher 3. It has become a go-to place for me to escape over the past 3 years, and is probably as close to my vision of a perfect game that I'm going to get. And despite my love for it, I could criticize it to no end. And no, I'm not talking about the fucking combat, you whiny babies. I'm talking the really contrived and frankly shit minimap that takes you out of the world you're supposed to experience in the first place. The sometimes poor pacing as a result of the open world and quest structure, and Batman's detective vision, which isn't even that bad, but can still be criticised. But for every stumble, The Witcher 3 takes a gigantic leap at setting the still prevalent standard of open world narrative driven RPGs. The fact that its side quest writing is as ingenious and detailed as its main quest. The fact that its combat has a much more exciting amount of depth than many other open world RPGs. And the fact that it tells a tale of a world and characters incredibly well and should be recognised for its creative prowess for many years to come. The Witcher 3 may not be everyone's favourite game of all time, but it sure as hell is mine.